this is how they reported it. U.S. speeds up Abrams tank delivery to Ukraine war zone. Then when I looked into it, they speed up the delivery because they are opting to send refurbished older models that could be ready faster, and that canceled the original plan which was to send state of the art newer Abrams tanks. So the question was, even with the new tanks, how was going to change the war? But now instead they're saying them older models that still won't be ready before the end of the year. There's so many things that they're telling you. But go ahead, Garland, if you want to add to that.
A couple of things on the tanks. I'd read into that closely. Number one, when they said they were going to send the newer tanks, what they said was they're on order. And we've got some other countries who have to be ordered first and after that. In other words, a couple years from now, when there's no such thing as Ukraine. In other words, we're going to say we're going to send them tanks. Exactly. They literally said, but we've got other countries that's got to get them first. So whenever they get built, now it's okay. We got some old tanks we'll fix up. But here's the bottom line. It's not like if you're trained to drive a tank, a particular tank, and it's totally different and it's self-loading and it's all this stuff, right? That now they can take you out, stick you in a tank that you've never trained in. One tank has 3 people, one total different electronic systems, operating systems, everything's different. And they're going to stick you in this tank and you're going to be perfectly proficient with it. And you're going to go out with no air cover against the other tanks. Let's not forget, you know why they're sending tanks? Because Ukraine started with 3,000 tanks and they're just about out of tanks. The reality is pretty much all their tanks have been blown to smithereens. Now they're going to send them more tanks, fewer tanks, various kinds. Here we'll give you this kind of tank and that kind of tank, and we'll teach you a couple days how to use it, and you are going to go in there and get blown up. You barely know how to use the tank. The other thing is this. At one point in my life, I was a hovercraft operator. Hovercraft has been compared to hovercrafts, tanks, helicopters, things of that nature. And I was also an engineer. I worked on them. And one of the sayings that we had about hovercrafts was there's always something broke. It's just a matter of finding it, right? When you have something like a tank, every time you go out and use it, when you come back, man, massive amounts of maintenance. Things are loose. They got to be tightened up. Things are bolts because of the vibrations have backed out. Man, you need lots of maintenance. You can use them like a lot of things like that. For every 2 hours of use, it takes 4 hours of maintenance, literally. So the idea that you can throw these tanks out in the middle of the battlefield 1,000 miles from anywhere, and they're going to go out there. How are you going to continue the refueling for? How are you going to have the supply lines of something that literally M1 tanks get gallons per mile, not miles per gallon? It's absurd that you can just throw a bunch of tanks. This is propaganda for people that don't understand the reality of this kind of hardware and what it takes on a battlefield and the level of training it takes to use it effectively. If you put soldiers in that stuff, they're just going to get out there and get themselves killed. They're sitting ducks in those things if they did it. And I would argue most of the stuff will never even get there. That's for us. So we can feel like they're still sending stuff. Huh?
I'll pass you, Cedric. I know you want to chime in, but I know this sounds obvious after listening to Garland's explanation. But the reason why the explanation is so important, because I watched countless segments, saw countless tweets from liberal blue check journalists where they was propagandizing people, where they were saying, this is a game changer. And they admitted everything you said here. And if you separate yourself from the propaganda, like I know a lot of you guys do, it sounds obvious, but there are liberals that watch this shit that are like, yes, those 40 tanks is about to cause an offensive. It's over. Thank God for the tank. They had protests where there was a pro-Ukrainian protest. Well, they was like, come on, Biden, send the tanks. Send the tanks. It's like, these people really thought that was going to be game changer. But anyway, go ahead, CJ. I'll pass
yeah, so I'm going to ask you, Garland, about this tweet. And Nick, you kind of alluded to this was something you were going to go to anyway, but this is what I was going to ask him about. But first, to just speak on the tanks, I think Garland, it speaks to their concept or their idea of how long this war is going to be. Because if the tank is not going to be ready for another year, 2 years, or whenever it's going to be, that's them acknowledging this needs to go on at least the amount of time it's going to take the tank to get there. Could you imagine they broker peace in 3 months and then they still got tanks on back order? Like, what are they going to do? You think weapons manufacturers give refunds or something? Like, could you speak to how these weapons that are supposed to be on back order, how it really speaks to when you're talking about a year, 2 year, the length of time of the expectation of the people that want to keep this going.
Well, you know, it's funny you say that because they're contradictions. Because recently, a lot have come out that they've said, you know, we're going to be running out of there are little articles that said, you know, this summer we cannot continue to maintain the level of ammunition that's being expended by Ukraine, and by the summer we're going to be kind of running out of ammunition. There's been articles where they've said, well, Ukraine has to do a big offensive in the spring, because if they don't, we're going to be running out of ammunition and things to support them. Basically, they're realizing and admitting that the logistics is just a portion of the war, that they're going to be unable to maintain it. So they're saying, oh, we're going to go on for years, 12 years, 100 years. But then you read between the lines and you see these articles and you see these generals admitting this can't go on but so much longer, because we don't have the logistics to continue. And they're losing tanks and they're losing things far faster than we can replace them. And at some point, they're going to be standing there out of ammo. So they would love for this thing to go on, you know, ad infinitum. But the realization is they know that there's a tip, they're past the tipping point, and they're trying to hold on now, and they're coming up to a point probably by the summer, and the latest the fall, but probably this summer, things are going to be very, very difficult to maintain it. And my prediction is at some point, you're going to get a collapse. You're going to get a military and political collapse in Ukraine. And at that point, things are going to fall apart. And my argument, my perspective is, I think Russia will, at that point, impose their will, that they won't. They'll say, why should we negotiate? Why should I negotiate if you're laying on the ground and I'm punching you in the face? I ain't negotiating. I'm winning the fight.